for centuries in the scholastic halls of Europe and the hushed libraries of Western Christendom. The Book of Enoch was little more than a whisper, a spectral title, a reference in ancient texts, a tantalizing ghost of a book thought irrevocably lost. Its very mention conjured images of forgotten lore, of narratives too strange, too unsettling, to ever gain wide acceptance. The academic consensus held that, if any fragments existed, they were mere curiosities, remnants of an ancient, aberrant sect, yet, unknown to the Western world, a full and vibrant tradition of this very text had been carefully preserved, guarded by the ancient Christian communities of Ethiopia. Imagine the quiet, mountainous monasteries of the Ethiopian highlands, isolated by geography and language, where time seemed to slow, preserving customs and texts long abandoned elsewhere. Within these stone walls, amid the rhythmic chants of Ge'ez, the ancient liturgical language, scribes meticulously copied manuscripts that had been passed down through generations. Among these sacred texts, revered and studied, was the Mashafa Henoch, the Book of Enoch, for the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church. Enoch was not an apocryphal oddity, but a canonical book, a foundational scripture, deeply integrated into their theology and worldview. The moment of its re-entry into Western consciousness was, ironically, not through dramatic archaeological excavation, but through persistent, almost obsessive, scholarly pursuit in the late 18th century. The Scottish explorer James Bruce, an adventurer with a keen interest in antiquities, embarked on a perilous journey to Abyssinia, Ethiopia. He was not merely seeking geographical wonders, he was drawn by rumors of ancient manuscripts, of a Bible that contained books unknown in the West. His return to Europe in 1773, bearing 3 Ge'ez copies of the Book of Enoch, was met with a mix of astonishment and deep skepticism. How could such a significant religious text have simply vanished from the Western canon, only to reappear from such a distant, seemingly isolated land? The initial reaction among European scholars was one of profound bewilderment, bordering on dismissal. The very idea that a major prophetic work, attributed to the antediluvian patriarch Enoch, grandfather of Noah, could have been completely lost to the West and preserved only in Ethiopia, seemed improbable. Translations slowly began to emerge, first into English in the early 19th century. As the ancient Ge'ez script yielded its secrets, the contents of Enoch began to unfold, revealing a cosmos far more elaborate, a history of divine rebellion far more explicit, and a narrative of humanity's corruption far more vivid than anything contained within the accepted biblical canon. The realization that this was not merely a forgotten text, but one that had been deliberately suppressed and effectively banished from the Jewish and Christian traditions of the West, slowly dawned. Why had this occurred? What secrets did it hold that warranted such a meticulous erasure for centuries? Scholars had only known about Enoch through brief, enigmatic references in ancient works, notably a quotation in the New Testament book of Jude, verse 14 to 15, which cites a prophecy directly from Enoch. This canonical endorsement made its absence from the rest of the Christian Bible all the more puzzling. Its reappearance forced a confrontation with this paradox. The Book of Enoch, upon its rediscovery, was a literary leviathan. It was not a single, cohesive narrative penned by one author, but a compilation of diverse apocalyptic and prophetic writings spanning several centuries. Likely from the 3rd century BCE to the 1st century CE, its composite nature, however, did not diminish its impact. It presented a worldview so distinct, so rich in detail about angels, demons, the origins of evil, and cosmic judgment, that it immediately challenged the conventional understanding of early Jewish and Christian eschatology. Its survival in Ethiopia, a bastion of ancient Christian tradition that maintained relative isolation from the theological currents that shaped Western orthodoxy, was nothing short of miraculous. It hinted at a broader, more diverse ancient Hebrew and early Christian textual landscape, one where the Book of Enoch played a far more central role than Western scholars had ever imagined. Its very existence, plucked from obscurity, became a potent symbol of forgotten knowledge and deliberate theological choices. The mystery deepened with each translated page. What specific elements within this rediscovered text were so profoundly disturbing to the gatekeepers of the ancient canons? What revelations within its chapters necessitated its systematic removal from the foundational scriptures that would shape Western thought for millennia? The initial sense of scholarly surprise soon gave way to a dawning recognition that Enoch's banishment was not arbitrary. It contained narratives and concepts so challenging, so potentially subversive, that they would inevitably clash with the developing orthodoxies. And at the very heart of these unsettling narratives lay a cosmic tale of rebellion, of angels descending, and of forbidden knowledge unleashed upon humanity. Of all the narratives contained within the Book of Enoch, none is more startling, more profoundly unsettling, and ultimately more subversive to conventional biblical interpretation than the detailed account of the Watcher's descent. This story, a cosmic rebellion far more elaborate than the brief, enigmatic mention in Genesis 6, presents a shocking origin for much of the world's evil, placing the blame not on humanity's initial disobedience, but on the direct transgression of heavenly beings. Imagine a pristine, antediluvian earth before the great flood, inhabited by a nascent humanity. Above them, in the celestial spheres, existed a class of angels, known in Enoch as the Watchers or Iranin. Their duty, as their name suggests, was to observe, to guard, and to remain in their assigned heavenly stations. But a profound temptation, born of desire and forbidden curiosity, gripped a faction of these celestial beings. Enoch paints a vivid picture. And it came to pass, when the children of men had multiplied, that in those days were born unto them beautiful and comely daughters. And the angels, the children of the heaven, saw and lusted after them, and said to one another, Come, let us choose us wives from among the children of men, and beget us children. This was not a subtle deviation. It was an audacious, collective act of disobedience, initiated by their leader, Semyaz, the chief of 200 watchers, who bound them by an oath to carry out their sinful pact. What followed was a descent that irrevocably altered the course of human history. These watchers, abandoning their spiritual domain, materialized on earth, taking human wives, but their transgression went far beyond forbidden union in their fallen state. Driven by a desire to usurp divine prerogative and perhaps to exert control, they imparted to humanity a vast array of forbidden knowledge, secrets that were never meant for mortals, reserved only for the divine realm. Enoch meticulously lists these dangerous gifts: metallurgy and weaponry. Azazel, one of the principal watchers, taught humans how to make swords, knives, shields, and breastplates. This was the genesis of warfare, instruments of death and destruction previously unknown to humanity. The golden and silver adornments he taught led to vanity and lust, cosmetics and adornments. He also instructed women in the art of making bracelets, ornaments, and various dyes, especially those used to darken the eyelids. This introduction of artificial beauty and self-adornment was seen not as innocent expression, but as leading to seduction, corruption, and moral decay, diverting humanity from spiritual purity. Sorcery and enchantments. Other watchers taught spells, incantations, and root cutting, practices that would later be condemned as sorcery and black magic, granting humanity illicit power over nature and each other. Astrology and celestial divination. Barakel taught the signs of the stars, and Kokabel the constellations. These celestial secrets, meant to be observed by God's order, were perverted into tools for divination and fortune-telling, challenging divine providence and leading humanity away from true worship. Other forbidden arts. The Book of Enoch details further revelations: the secrets of the clouds, signs of the earth, the signs of the sun, and the course of the moon, all knowledge that, in its proper context, belonged to the divine, was now profaned and weaponized in human hands. The result of this influx of forbidden knowledge was catastrophic, Enoch states, and there arose much godlessness, and they committed fornication, and they were led astray, and became corrupt in all their ways. Humanity was not simply led astray by temptation, it was taught corruption, instructed in the arts of violence, deception, and self-indulgence by their celestial betrayers. This profoundly shifted the narrative of human sin. It was not merely humanity's fault. A significant portion of the blame lay squarely on the shoulders of these rebellious angels. This narrative directly challenged and expanded upon the terse account in Genesis 6:1-4, which merely states that the sons of God saw the daughters of men that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. The Genesis account is brief, almost cryptic. Enoch explodes this into a full-blown cosmic epic of angelic fall and widespread terrestrial corruption, painting a far darker, more explicit picture of the origins of evil on earth for the emerging Jewish and later Christian orthodoxies. This detailed Watcher narrative presented immense theological difficulties. Origin of evil, it offered a competing, highly explicit explanation for the proliferation of evil and violence before the flood, one that seemed to dilute human responsibility by pointing to angelic instigation, angelology. It introduced a complex and controversial angelology, with specific named fallen angels and a detailed account of their specific transgressions, which was far more elaborate than the canonical scriptures and thus hard to control. To its divine order. It depicted a breach in the divine order by powerful heavenly beings, implying a certain vulnerability in God's cosmic governance before he intervened. Forbidden knowledge. The very concept of forbidden knowledge being the source of human corruption was deeply unsettling. While Genesis focused on a moral transgression disobedience, Enoch described intellectual corruption through illicit sciences. The Church Fathers, struggling to consolidate a unified doctrine, found this narrative of the Watchers problematic. While some early fathers like Tertullian and Irenaeus were familiar with Enoch and even quoted from it, its explicit detailing of angel-human interbreeding and the specific forbidden arts they taught was simply too wild, too challenging to integrate into a coherent, simple theology that could be universally taught. It complicated the narrative of human sin and divine judgment, and introduced a cosmology too prone to speculative and heretical interpretations. Thus, the Watcher's Descent, with its vivid descriptions of cosmic rebellion and humanity's instruction in the dark arts, became one of the primary reasons for Enoch's eventual banishment. It was a story too compelling, too captivating, but ultimately too destabilizing for the carefully constructed edifice of Orthodox belief. Its re-emergence from the shadows forced a confrontation with a version of early history far stranger and far more unsettling than the one officially sanctioned, and the consequences of this angelic transgression were not just the corruption of humanity, but the birth of monstrous beings that roamed the antediluvian world. The transgression of the Watchers, as detailed in the Book of Enoch, was not a crime without consequence. From their illicit unions with human women sprang forth offspring so monstrous, so utterly devastating to the antediluvian world, that their existence became a primary catalyst for the Great Flood. These were the Nephilim, towering giants, hybrid abominations whose insatiable appetites and inherent violence painted a picture of a world rapidly spiraling into an abyss of corruption. Imagine the horror, a world populated not just by humans, but by colossal beings, part angelic, part human, whose very nature was a defilement of divine order. Enoch describes them vividly, and they, the women, bare unto them great giants, whose height was 3,000 ells, who consumed all the acquisitions of men, and when men could no longer sustain them, the giants turned against them and devoured mankind. The sheer scale of these beings, their terrifying hunger, and their ultimate turn towards cannibalism are presented with a chilling detail absent from the brief, almost casual mention of the Nephilim in Genesis 6:4. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that. When the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown. Enoch's narrative transforms the Nephilim from mere mighty men into the primary agents of widespread corruption and violence. They were not simply big, they were insatiable, arrogant, and destructive by their very nature. Their existence was a living testament to the catastrophic consequences of angelic transgression. They devoured all of humanity's labour, consumed livestock, and when these resources ran out, they began to consume human flesh, shedding blood indiscriminately. This was not the work of individual human evil. This was a systemic, monstrous corruption born of supernatural defilement. The presence of the Nephilim profoundly shaped Enoch's explanation for the state of the world before the flood in the canonical account. Genesis 6:5 simply states, "And God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually." While still attributing evil to humanity, it lacks the explicit cosmic dimension provided by Enoch. Enoch argues that humanity's corruption was amplified, if not outright instigated, by the Watchers' forbidden knowledge and the devastating impact of their monstrous offspring. The world had gone amiss because of a profound, unnatural mingling of realms, the celestial invading the terrestrial, producing grotesque hybrids. Furthermore, Enoch introduces the concept of the spirits of the Nephilim after their death. These were not merely the souls of deceased giants, they were described as evil spirits, bastard spirits, who would then afflict humanity until the day of judgment. And now the giants, who are produced from the spirit and flesh, shall be called evil spirits upon the earth, and from the earth on their dwelling shall be. Evil spirits have proceeded from their bodies, because they are born from men, and from the Watchers is their beginning and primal origin. They shall be evil spirits on earth, and evil spirits shall they be called. This provided a detailed demonology, explaining the origin of evil spirits and their continued torment of humanity, a concept far more elaborate than the brief mentions of unclean spirits in canonical texts. The theological implications of this Nephilim narrative for the emerging canons were deeply problematic. Unique origin of evil, Enoch offered an explicit, supernatural origin for widespread evil in demons, diverging significantly from the orthodox focus on humanity's fall from grace and the spiritual fall of Satan to angels in a less direct, less physical manner. This complicated the established doctrine of sin, hybridity, and defilement. The concept of physical interbreeding between angels and humans, resulting in monstrous offspring, was considered a profound defilement of divine order and potentially a threat to the purity of the human lineage that would lead to Christ. It introduced a chaotic element that was hard to reconcile with a creation narrative emphasized as good, the flood's purpose, while Genesis presents the flood as God's response to human wickedness. Enoch clearly frames it as a necessary act of cleansing the earth from the defilement brought by the Watchers and the Nephilim. The flood became a cosmic purification, a divine intervention to rectify an unnatural breach in creation, rather than solely a judgment on human moral failing. Demonology, Enoch's elaborate demonology, with named demonic entities originating from the Nephilim, provided a detailed background that was largely absent from canonical scriptures, which preferred a simpler, less anthropomorphic explanation for evil spirits. The Church Fathers, in their relentless efforts to standardize doctrine and create a coherent narrative, found the Nephilim story, in its detailed Enochic form, too wild, too speculative, and too deeply interwoven with the controversial Watcher narrative. While some early fathers might have been familiar with or even quoted Enoch, its literal acceptance of angelic human hybrids and the specific origin of demons from their spirits proved too challenging to integrate. It opened a Pandora's box of cosmological questions that were best left closed for the sake of doctrinal simplicity and unified authority. Thus, the magnificent, terrifying saga of the Nephilim became another profound reason for the Book of Enoch's banishment. It was a story of giants and hybrid horrors, of insatiable appetites and cosmic defilement. That explained the world's ancient corruption in a way that the canonical narrative chose to leave veiled. Its disappearance from the mainstream left a significant gap in Western understanding of the antediluvian world, a gap now filled by its rediscovery, forcing a confrontation with a version of pre-flood history far more dramatic and unsettling than previously conceived. And beyond these tales of earthly defilement, Enoch also offered revelations of celestial glory, describing journeys into the very heart of the divine cosmos. Beyond the terrestrial drama of the Watchers and the Nephilim, the Book of Enoch plunges the reader into an even more astonishing realm, the celestial journeys of Enoch himself. Elevated from an earthly patriarch, Enoch is transformed into a divine scribe, a cosmic traveller, granted unparalleled access to the innermost workings of the heavens, the secrets of creation, and the very throne room of God. These visions, far grander and more detailed than any found in the canonical scriptures, presented a form of divine access and esoteric knowledge that directly challenged the emerging religious hierarchies and their claims to soul mediation. Imagine Enoch, a mortal man taken by angels to the far reaches of the cosmos. He traverses vast, desolate lands beyond the habitable world, witnessing mountains of fire, rivers of flame, and the prison houses of the fallen watchers. He is led through chambers of swirling winds, through the storehouses of hail and snow, and shown the origins of the elements. These are not mere poetic descriptions, they are detailed, almost scientific, accounts of a universe governed by intricate divine laws. His journeys extend beyond the physical cosmos into the very architecture of the heavens. He sees the movements of the celestial bodies, sun, moon, and stars, not as random phenomena, but as meticulously ordered by divine command, each with its own angels guiding its path. He learns the secrets of the calendar, the precise reckoning of time, and the cycles of nature, all governed by an unbending divine decree. This knowledge, revealed through celestial tours, provided a far more complex and deterministic understanding of the universe than was typically conveyed. But the climax of Enoch's celestial odyssey is his ascent into the highest heavens, into the very presence of the great glory God himself. He describes chambers adorned with crystal walls, thrones radiating with light, and countless legions of angels serving before the divine majesty. In these sacred precincts, Enoch is granted visions of profound theological significance. He sees the book of life and the books of judgment, wherein are recorded the deeds and destinies of all beings. He is shown the secrets of creation, how light and darkness were separated, and the deep mysteries of the earth's foundations. Crucially, he encounters the Son of Man, often identified as a pre-existent messianic figure, seated on a throne of glory, destined to judge the world and rule over the elect. This pre-existent, cosmic messianic figure, so vividly portrayed in Enoch, offers a parallel and perhaps influential view to the canonical Christology, but with distinct nuances. He is commissioned as a scribe of righteousness, tasked with recording the judgment of the watchers and the righteous, and with delivering divine pronouncements. This direct, unmediated access to divine knowledge and the celestial realms through Enoch's visionary journeys presented a fundamental challenge to the developing religious institutions, challenging priestly authority. If a patriarch from the distant past could ascend to heaven, learn the secrets of the cosmos, and receive direct prophecies from God, what did that say about the need for priestly mediation, temple rituals, or specialized clergy to interpret divine will? Enoch's journeys empowered the individual visionary, implying that direct revelation was possible outside of established religious structures. Cosmological depth. Enoch's highly detailed cosmology and apocalyptic visions were far more elaborate than anything found in the nascent Jewish and Christian canons. This level of detail, while intellectually compelling, could also lead to endless speculation, diverse interpretations, and sectarian divisions, precisely what emerging orthodoxy sought to avoid. Deterministic prophecy, the meticulous prophecies concerning judgment and the end times, coupled with the precise ordering of the cosmos, implied a highly deterministic universe, while this offered a sense of divine control. It could also undermine the concept of human free will and the significance of individual repentance or choice, which were central to orthodox salvific doctrines. Alternative messianic figure. The concept of a pre-existent Son of Man with a clear judicial role, while having parallels with Christ, presented a potentially competing, or at least significantly different, messianic theology that required careful integration or suppression to avoid doctrinal confusion. For the gatekeepers of the Jewish and later Christian canons, Enoch's journeys were simply too much. They were too grand, too specific, too revelatory, and too independent of the foundational narratives and emerging hierarchies they were trying to establish. His cosmology was difficult to reconcile with a simpler, unified creation story. His direct pipeline to divine secrets bypassed the authority of priests, prophets, and, eventually, the Church itself. The paradox of Enoch's influence is clear, while explicitly quoted in Jude and influencing various aspects of early Christian thought, e.g., demonology, apocalyptic imagery. The sheer scope and detail of his celestial revelations ultimately proved too unwieldy, too challenging to the centralizing forces of religious authority. The secrets he unveiled were simply too potent, too likely to inspire individual mystical journeys that could deviate from controlled doctrine. Thus, Enoch's journeys, though breathtaking in scope, ultimately became another reason for his book's banishment to the shadows, preserving a simpler, more controllable vision of the cosmos and humanity's place within it. But before his banishment, Enoch revealed even more secrets, those concerning the final judgment and the intricate geography of the afterlife. Enoch's celestial journeys were not merely cosmic sightseeing, they were profound revelations concerning the ultimate fate of souls, the meticulous nature of divine judgment, and the intricate, often terrifying, architecture of the afterlife. The Book of Enoch offered a vision of the cosmos governed by an unbending, detailed divine plan, one that laid bare the mechanisms of retribution and eternal destiny with a specificity that would ultimately prove deeply unsettling to the burgeoning orthodoxies. Imagine Enoch, guided by angels, peering into the hidden valleys and chambers prepared for the souls of the dead. He describes these intermediate states, distinct from the final abodes of the blessed or the damned, as temporary holding places. He sees separate valleys for the spirits of the righteous, waiting for the day of judgment and resurrection, for sinners who receive no retribution on earth, for the spirits of those who justly lamented the wickedness of the watchers, and for the spirits of the giants Nephilim who would remain in torment until the final judgment. This nuanced geography of the afterlife, with its distinct compartments and differing conditions, was far more detailed than anything explicitly provided in the canonical scriptures, which tended to speak of simpler categories like heaven and hell, or Sheol, Hades. But Enoch's visions extend far beyond these temporary abodes. He is granted a terrifying glimpse into the abyss of Gehenna, the ultimate place of torment for the wicked, described with vivid, visceral imagery of fire, darkness, and eternal suffering, the punishment for the watchers, for the Nephilim, and for unrepentant humanity, is laid out with chilling precision. This detailed demonology and eschatology study of end times in Enoch provided a comprehensive framework for understanding divine justice, but also introduced complexities that the later, more streamlined doctrines of the Church would struggle to reconcile. Crucially, Enoch's prophetic visions extend to the very end of time, detailing the final judgment, the complete destruction of the wicked, and the establishment of a new, righteous earth. He describes the coming of the Son of Man, a pre-existent messianic figure, seated on a throne of glory, who will execute judgment upon both heavenly and earthly beings. This Son of Man will be the judge, the shepherd of the righteous, and the one who reveals all hidden things. This figure, though distinct from the canonical Christ in some ways, clearly influenced early Christian thought about Jesus' role as judge and redeemer. Yet Enoch's specific articulation of his pre-existence and cosmic role was unique. The overarching impression conveyed by Enoch's visions of judgment and the afterlife is one of a highly deterministic cosmos. Every action, every transgression, every secret knowledge imparted by the watchers had a predetermined consequence. The celestial movements, the cycles of nature, and the ultimate destiny of souls were all part of an unbending, preordained divine plan. This deterministic worldview implied a universe where events unfolded according to a meticulously established cosmic order, leading inexorably towards a final righteous judgment. This detailed deterministic eschatology and demonology posed significant challenges to the evolving theological frameworks of both rabbinic Judaism and nascent Christianity. Predestination versus inertia. Free will. The strong deterministic currents in Enoch, where even celestial movements and the fate of angels seem bound by unyielding laws, could be interpreted as undermining the concept of human free will. If judgment was so meticulously preordained, what was the role of repentance, choice, or grace? Concepts central to both Jewish covenant theology and Christian salvific doctrines. Elaborate afterlife. The intricate multi-layered geography of the afterlife in Enoch was far more specific and complex than what the canonical scriptures presented. While enriching for some, this level of detail could be seen as speculative, potentially leading to unnecessary doctrinal disputes and undermining the simpler, more universal message about heaven and hell. Source of authority. Enoch claims direct revelation from God and angelic guides for these detailed visions. This asserted a powerful, independent source of prophetic authority that bypassed the Mosaic law and the traditions being established by the Jewish priesthood or the Christian apostles and bishops. Influence on canonical texts. While Enoch clearly influenced canonical texts, e.g. Jude's, quote, Peter's mention of imprisoned spirits, its explicit and highly detailed accounts of the watchers, Nephilim, and the intricate workings of the afterlife could potentially overshadow or complicate the simpler narratives the Church wished to emphasize. The Church sought clarity and universal accessibility, not complex esotericism. For the Church Fathers, grappling with heresies and striving for doctrinal unity, the highly specific and often unsettling details of Enoch's judgment and afterlife visions were simply too problematic. While elements might have been useful for explaining certain concepts, the overall deterministic tone, the elaborate demonology, and the independent prophetic authority of Enoch were difficult to integrate into a theology that emphasized human agency, the universality of sin and grace, and the centrality of the Church's mediation for salvation. Thus, the profound insights into judgment, hell, and the afterlife contained within the Book of Enoch, while providing a richly detailed cosmic canvas, ultimately contributed to its exclusion from the accepted canon. Its vision of a meticulously predetermined cosmos, replete with specific realms for the damned and the righteous, was too powerful, too challenging to the narratives of free will and the simpler, more controllable paths to salvation that the emerging Church wished to promote. Its removal from the mainstream allowed for a less complicated and more institutionally manageable understanding of humanity's destiny. The re-emergence of the Book of Enoch in the modern era, after centuries of obscurity in the West, naturally begs the most critical question: why was such a significant and influential text clearly known to and even quoted by some early Jewish and Christian figures, ultimately excluded from the biblical canons. The decision to banish Enoch was not arbitrary. It was a complex interplay of theological development, institutional consolidation, and the strategic gatekeeping of sacred texts by those who sought to define and control the very essence of faith. Imagine the fierce intellectual and spiritual debates unfolding in the early centuries of both Judaism and Christianity. There was no single, universally agreed upon list of sacred scriptures. Instead, various communities held different collections of revered texts. For early Judaism, particularly in the Hellenistic period, Enoch enjoyed considerable popularity. Its narrative of the Watchers provided a compelling explanation for the origins of evil, and its apocalyptic visions offered hope amidst persecution. However, by the time of the 1st century CE and the emergence of Rabbinic Judaism after the destruction of the Second Temple, a more streamlined and exclusive canon began to take shape. The Council of Jamnia, though its historical reality as a single, formal council is debated, it represents a period of rabbinic deliberation, saw a move towards defining a Hebrew Bible that largely excluded texts not originally written in Hebrew or Aramaic, or those deemed too speculative or divisive. Enoch, with its elaborate angelology and unique cosmology, fell outside this developing consensus, being seen as a sectarian text rather than a universal one. So for nascent Christianity, the situation was even more dynamic. Early Christians inherited much of the Jewish scripture of the Old Testament, but they also produced their own sacred writings, the Gospels, epistles, and apocalyptic visions that would eventually form the New Testament. The process of canon formation was not completed until the late 4th and early 5th centuries CE, a period marked by intense theological debates and the consolidation of the Roman Church's authority. Several critical reasons converged to seal Enoch's fate in the Western Christian canon. Unorthodox cosmology and angelology. As explored in previous chapters, Enoch's detailed account of the Watchers, their physical descent, and their hybrid offspring. Nephilim presented a complex and often grotesque angelology that contradicted the simpler, more controlled angelology emerging in Orthodox doctrine. The idea of angels physically mating with humans was deemed scandalous and difficult to reconcile with the established purity of divine beings. The explicit origin of demons from the dead Nephilim also provided a highly specific demonology that the Church preferred to leave more ambiguous or attribute solely to fallen angel Satan and his ilk rather than deceased giants. Challenge to human responsibility and the origin of evil Enoch's narrative, by attributing a significant portion of antediluvian corruption to the Watcher's direct intervention and forbidden knowledge, could be seen as diluting human culpability for sin. The emerging Orthodox theology emphasized human free will and responsibility for the fall and the universal need for redemption through Christ's sacrifice. A complex angelic conspiracy as the primary source of evil complicated this straightforward narrative, speculative nature, and esoteric detail. The sheer volume of Enoch's esoteric revelations, its detailed celestial journeys, the intricate workings of the cosmos, the precise measurements of celestial bodies, and the elaborate geography of the afterlife was a double-edged sword. While awe-inspiring, this level of speculative detail could be seen as distracting, potentially leading to endless debates, sectarian divisions, and a focus on hidden knowledge over simple faith. The Church aimed for a more accessible, universally understood message. Independent prophetic authority. Enoch presents himself as a direct recipient of divine revelation, bypassing the established prophetic lineages of Israel and the apostolic authority being solidified in the Church. His visions asserted a powerful, independent source of truth that was difficult to control or integrate into a centralized, hierarchical structure. The Church sought to be the sole interpreter of God's Word and the exclusive mediator of divine truth. Any text that suggested direct unmediated access to cosmic secrets was a threat to this claim. Concerns about determinism as discussed. Enoch's highly deterministic worldview, where cosmic events and human destinies seem meticulously preordained, could be seen as undermining the critical theological concepts of free will, divine grace, and the efficacy of repentance and human choice, all central to the orthodox path to salvation. Association with heresies over time. The Book of Enoch became particularly popular among certain Jewish apocalyptic groups and later various Gnostic Christian sects, as these groups were increasingly condemned as heretical by the mainstream. Texts associated with them, like Enoch, were likewise discredited and rejected. Early church fathers who had once referenced Enoch, like Tertullian or Clement of Alexandria, found themselves in a difficult position as the church moved towards greater uniformity. Augustine of Hippo, a key figure in shaping Western theology, explicitly rejected Enoch in the 5th century, a decisive blow to its potential inclusion. The exclusion of Enoch, therefore, was a strategic move by the canon's gatekeepers. It was not a simple oversight, but a deliberate act of theological pruning, ensuring that the foundational scriptures supported a specific, unified narrative of creation, fall, redemption, and a clear chain of authority. What was sacrificed in this process was a rich, complex, and often unsettling vision of the cosmos and the origins of evil, a vision that, despite its banishment, would continue to cast a long shadow on the fringes of religious thought for millennia. Its rediscovery shattered the illusion of a monolithic textual history and forced a re-evaluation of what truths were deemed too dangerous to preach. The banishment of the Book of Enoch from the Western biblical canon was, for centuries, a profound success for the gatekeepers of orthodoxy. Its narratives of watchers, Nephilim, celestial journeys, and a deterministic cosmos faded into scholarly obscurity, surviving only in the remote monasteries of Ethiopia. Yet, history demonstrates that certain ideas, once conceived, are almost impossible to truly eradicate. Like a deep resonant chord struck long ago, Enoch's concepts, though officially silenced, have continued to cast a profound, often unacknowledged, shadow over later religious traditions, esoteric movements, and even contemporary thought. Its very re-emergence in the modern era forces a confrontation with the enduring power of forbidden knowledge. Consider the pervasive influence of Enoch on later Jewish mystical traditions, particularly Merkabah mysticism and early Kabbalah. While Rabbinic Judaism rejected Enoch from its canon, its imagery and themes of heavenly ascent, encounters with angelic beings, and understanding the divine throne chariot, Merkabah, clearly resonate with Enoch's celestial journeys. The concept of a divine scribe gaining secret knowledge of the heavens continued to inspire Jewish mystics for centuries, suggesting that the spirit of Enoch's visions found a new, albeit esoteric, home within Jewish thought. Within early Christian apocalyptic thought, Enoch's influence was undeniable. Even after its formal exclusion, many early Christian writers familiar with Enoch drew upon its rich imagery of divine judgment, the end times, and the coming of the Son of Man. Elements of Enoch's demonology and angelology filtered into popular belief, shaping understandings of spiritual warfare and the nature of evil, even when the source text was no longer explicitly referenced or widely read. The vivid descriptions of hell and eternal punishment in later Christian theology arguably owe some of their graphic detail to Enoch's earlier, more detailed visions of the underworld. The rediscovery of Enoch in the modern era, particularly in the 19th and 20th centuries, ignited a renewed fascination. The discovery of fragments among the Dead Sea Scrolls further solidified its antiquity and wide circulation in Second Temple Judaism, lending immense credibility to the Ethiopic text. This intellectual re-engagement forced scholars to re-evaluate the development of biblical canon and to acknowledge the vibrant diversity of early Jewish and Christian belief that had been purposefully streamlined. Today, Enoch's shadow stretches into surprising corners of contemporary spirituality and popular culture. The enduring fascination with angels and demons, often expressed in fiction, film, and esoteric spiritual circles, frequently draws upon themes remarkably similar to Enoch's Watchers and Nephilim. Even if the direct source is unknown to the audience, the idea of fallen angels, distinct from Satan, who directly corrupted humanity, has a powerful resonance that continues to explain evil in a way the canonical narrative, standing alone, sometimes struggles to do for modern minds. The concept of secret knowledge and suppressed histories, prevalent in online communities and alternative spiritual movements, mirrors the long journey of Enoch itself. The very fact that the book was banned for a reason fuels curiosity, tapping into a human desire to uncover hidden truths and challenge official narratives. Even the pervasive presence of giants in popular fantasy and speculative fiction can be seen as a faint echo of the Nephilim narrative, demonstrating the enduring psychological power of these ancient, hybrid beings. More broadly, Enoch speaks to a deeper human yearning for a more detailed cosmology, a desire to understand the mechanics of the universe, the layers of heaven, and the precise nature of divine justice, beyond what is offered in simpler, more accessible religious texts. The legacy of the Book of Enoch is not merely that of a fascinating ancient text, but of a powerful spiritual narrative that was deliberately pushed to the fringes. Its banishment was a strategic act of religious control, a decision to simplify and standardize a complex spiritual landscape. But the act of burying it also preserved its unsettling power, for in its very absence, Enoch hinted at depths and complexities of divine interaction and human destiny that the mainstream tradition chose not to explore. The rediscovery of Enoch is more than an academic curiosity. It is an invitation to confront the selective nature of religious history and to question the narratives we have inherited. It asks us to consider why certain knowledge was deemed too dangerous, and what implications that historical choice has for our understanding of the divine, evil, and our own place in the cosmos. The whisper of the Watchers, the shadow of the Nephilim, and the celestial journeys of Enoch continue to resonate, inviting those drawn to secrets to delve deeper. Knowledge buried for centuries, now uncovered, and still, there's more. What other forbidden truths lie waiting, just beneath the surface of the stories we think we know?